The relief convoy had been traveling for 11 standard cycles when the first reactor failed. Fleet Commander Vexel watched the damage report scroll across their command interface with the numb acceptance of someone who had watched the same notification appear on 73 different ships over the past month. The Eurylian fleet, what remained of it, had been running from the Assembly's extermination squad since the border colonies fell. 300 warships reduced to 42. 42 reduced to 19. 19 held together by salvage, spite, and the desperate hope that somewhere in the galaxy, someone hadn't yet chosen sides. Earth had chosen nothing. That was why Vexel was bringing their dying ships to a planet most galactic civilizations considered a footnote, a minor agricultural world with a single orbital dock, and a species that had barely achieved faster-than-light travel 3 generations ago. Neutral, insignificant, ignored by the Assembly entirely because no one saw any strategic value in a species that still argued about currency and borders. The human diplomat had sent the message 6 days ago, short, direct, no political posturing. Your ships are damaged, we can repair them, no conditions. Vexel's tactical advisor, a scarred warrior named Thren, had called it a trap. The engineering corps had called it impossible. Human technology was primitive by Assembly standards, barely capable of maintaining their own civilian transports. But the Eurylian fleet had no fuel left for longer jumps, no food for another month of evasion, and somewhere behind them, the Assembly's hunter-killers were closing the distance. Commander, the sensor operator's voice cracked through the bridge's strained silence. Planetary Defense Network is active. There, letting us through. Vexel focused on the main viewport. Earth hung in the darkness, blue and green and white, wrapped in clouds that looked soft from this distance. Nothing threatening, nothing remarkable. The orbital dock was exactly where the humans had said it would be, a ring of gray metal and containment fields, smaller than a Eurylian supply station, spinning slowly against the stars. Open a channel. The human who appeared on Vexel's display was not what they expected. No military uniform, no ceremonial robes, just a worker in stained coverings, gray hair pulled back from a face marked by age and something that looked like old burns across the left cheek. The human, female, Vexel's translator indicated, studied the bridge behind them with an expression that reminded Vexel of a merchant appraising damaged cargo. Fleet Commander Vexel, the human said, I'm Dock Master Rosa Ibanez. You have 19 ships, we have 12 dry docks. She didn't wait for a response. We'll work in rotations, most damaged first. Give us your schematics, your damage reports, and your crew counts. We need to know how many life support systems we're talking about. Vexel's mandibles tightened. No negotiation, no formal welcome, no acknowledgement of the war, the Assembly, or the fact that 19 alien warships were now orbiting a planet that couldn't defend itself against a single one of them. You speak as if this arrangement is already decided. The human, Rosa Ibanez, tilted her head. You came here because you have no other options. I'm offering you repairs because we have empty docks and bored engineers. She paused. Also because the Assembly has been telling everyone that Earth isn't worth noticing. That irritates us. Behind Vexel, Thren made a sound of disbelief. They're using us to make a political statement. No, Rosa's gaze shifted to Thren as if she had heard the comment through the void. We're using you to see how Assembly ships are built, up close, with permission. She smiled, and there was nothing diplomatic about it. Everyone wins, except the people chasing you. They're going to have a very bad time. The channel closed. Vexel sat in silence as the first docking clamps engaged. Human maintenance tugs, ugly blocky things with too many thrusters, were already maneuvering toward the most damaged cruiser. They moved with precision that seemed impossible for such crude machines. Fast, confident, as if they had been practicing this exact operation for years. Thren leaned close. Commander, their dock network just sent us a work schedule. They're starting on the Remembrance in 30 minutes. The Remembrance has hull fractures across 3 decks. The assembly's own shipyards would need 2 weeks just to assess the damage. The humans say they'll have it spaceworthy in 4 days. Vexel watched the maintenance tugs latch onto the Remembrance's forward section. Small figures in pressure suits swarmed across the hull, moving with a purpose that felt almost aggressive. No hesitation, no safety inspections, just action. 4 days. Orbital dock, 12 dry docks. Human engineers, unknown quantity. Assembly hunter-killers, closing distance. Estimated time until arrival, 8 days. The numbers aligned in a way that made Vexel's blood run cold. "Cancel all weapons lockdowns," Vexel said quietly. "If the humans try to board our command deck, I want every Marine ready to." The proximity alarm cut them off. Vexel turned to see the Remembrance's forward hull plates peeling open, not from explosive decompression, not from damage. Someone had unsealed them deliberately, from the inside. Human pressure suits were crawling into the exposed compartments. They hadn't asked permission. They hadn't warned anyone. They just started cutting. Vexel's command deck erupted into chaos. There inside the weapons bay, hull integrity failing on Deck 7. Humans in the reactor shielding. Repeat, humans in the reactor shielding. Thren grabbed Vexel's shoulder with enough force to leave bruises. "Commander, we have to stop this. They're going to kill us all or steal everything we have or open a channel." The words came out calm, controlled. Vexel was neither of those things, but command had taught them that fear broadcasts loudest when you let it change your voice. The channel request went out. 3 seconds. 5, 10. Rosa Ibanez appeared again, still wearing the stained work clothes, still looking at Vexel like they were a puzzle she had already solved. "Your people are cutting into my ship," Vexel said. "Without permission, without notice. You said repairs. You didn't say you would." "We said we'd repair your ships." Rosa wiped something dark and oily from her hands onto a cloth. "We didn't say we'd do it the way you're used to. Your people inspect damage for 2 weeks, then requisition parts for 2 more weeks, then spend 3 weeks arguing about who pays for the repairs. By then, you're dead. The assembly catches you. The war ends." She stepped closer to her camera. Vexel could see the dock behind her now, human workers moving in patterns that looked like controlled chaos. Someone was welding. Someone else was carrying a component Vexel didn't recognize. Everyone was shouting. "We don't work that way," Rosa continued. "Your ship is broken. We're going to fix it. But we're going to fix it the way we know how, because our way works and your way got your fleet hunted across the galaxy." She pointed at something off-screen. "Your Remembrance has a cracked reactor housing. Your own engineers would replace it with an identical housing that cracks again in 6 months. We're going to reinforce it with a carbon weave that can survive a direct torpedo hit. That's not in your schematics. That's not in your protocols. That's better." Thren made a sound of outrage. "You're modifying our warships without approval. That's..." "Approval?" Rosa's expression didn't change, but something dangerous moved behind her eyes. "You're running for your lives. You don't have time for approval. You have time for results." She looked past the camera toward something Vexel couldn't see. "First hull plate is back on. Check your damage reports." Vexel turned to the engineering station. The display showed the Remembrance's forward section. The hull fractures that had been registering as critical failures were gone, sealed, reinforced. The system was still running diagnostics, but preliminary readings showed hull integrity at 93%. 93%. The ship had arrived at 31%. "The carbon weave," Vexel said slowly. "You already installed it." 15 minutes ago." Rosa shrugged. "Your people were too busy sounding alarms to notice we were almost finished." The command deck went still. Vexel could hear their own breathing, the hum of the life support, the distant clang of docking clamps adjusting to the Remembrance's new hull configuration. 19 ships, 12 dry docks, a species that had been ignored by the entire galaxy. And they had just reinforced a Eurylian cruiser's reactor, housing with a material that wasn't in any database. "Show me," Vexel said. Rosa nodded and led them through the dock's exterior cameras. The remembrance looked different now, not dramatically, but in ways Vexel's trained eye caught immediately. The hull plates had been resealed with a different alloy. The weapon mounts had been adjusted, angles changed by fractions of degrees that suggested someone had recalculated firing solutions. The engine exhaust ports were darker, shaped differently, as if the humans had replaced the entire thrust vectoring system while no one was watching. "When did you learn to do this?" Vexel asked. "We've been watching assembly technology for 50 years. Rosa's voice was matter-of-fact. "Every battle you've fought, every ship you've lost, every weapon you've deployed, we've been recording, analyzing, learning. We know how your ships break because we've seen them break 100 times. We just never had access to one while it was still intact." The implication settled over Vexel like a physical weight. "You've been waiting for this." "We've been patient." Rosa glanced at something off-screen. "The remembrance is done. We're moving to your command ship next. My engineers will need access to your bridge, your weapons control, and your primary computer core. If you don't grant it, we can't help you." "And if I refuse?" "Then you leave with 1 repaired ship and 18 wrecks. The assembly catches you in 6 days instead of 4. Rosa's smile returned, smaller this time. "Commander, I've been honest with you. We want to see how your systems work, but we also want you to survive. Those aren't contradictory goals." Vexel looked at their fleet. The remembrance hung in the docking cradle, hull gleaming with fresh welding, sensors showing integrity readings that shouldn't have been possible. 18 other ships waited their turn. 18 chances for the humans to learn more. 18 chances for the Eurylian fleet to become something it had never been. Something that might actually survive. "Granted," Vexel said, "but my Marines will accompany every engineering team if you try to weaponize our ships against us." Rosa laughed, not cruelly, not mockingly, just surprised. "Commander, we're not going to weaponize your ships against you." She leaned closer to the camera. "We're going to weaponize them against them." The channel closed. 3 hours later, the humans began cutting into the command ship's primary computer core. Vexel didn't sleep. The first sign that something had gone terribly wrong, or terribly right, came on the second day. Vexel had posted guards at every access point. Eurylian Marines in full combat gear stood watch over human engineering teams, tracking every movement, every tool, every component carried in or out of the ships. The humans worked around them as if the armed guards were furniture. No tension, no hostility, just the relentless, efficient motion of beings who had a job to do and no interest in anything else. Thren brought the report personally. "Commander, the humans have replaced the remembrance's targeting computer." Vexel looked up from the repair schedule. "Replaced with what?" "That's the problem, we don't know." Thren's mandibles were twitching, the Eurylian equivalent of controlled panic. "They removed the assembly standard processor core and installed something else, something we've never seen. The weapons officer says the new system is talking to the guns directly. No translator, no interface, just direct connection." Direct connection is impossible. Assembly weapons require authentication protocols for every firing solution. The computer has to. The human system doesn't care about protocols. Thren pulled up a schematic on Vexel's display. "Look at this. They've rewired the entire weapons network. The authentication layer is gone. The safety overrides are gone. The guns are waiting for a firing command from a system that doesn't exist in any military registry." Vexel studied the schematic. The human modifications were extensive, not just patches or reinforcements, but complete redesigns of systems that had been considered optimal for generations. Power conduits rerouted through backup channels that created redundancy no Eurylian engineer would have risked. Sensor arrays recalibrated to detect frequencies the assembly had declared impossible to scan. The reactor housing on the Remembrance was just the beginning. The humans had gone deeper. Much deeper. "Order all ships to run full diagnostics," Vexel said. "I want to know exactly what they've changed." 3 hours later, the results came in. The Remembrance's engines could now operate at 140% rated capacity without overheating. The Silent Storm's hull had been coated with a material that absorbed sensor pings instead of reflecting them. The last argument's life support system had been modified to recycle waste into emergency fuel. Every ship in the fleet had been altered in ways that made no tactical sense, until Vexel realized the humans weren't just repairing damage. They were rebuilding the fleet for a different kind of war. "Commander," Thren's voice was barely controlled. "We found something else. In the command ship's computer core, the humans didn't just read our data, they left something behind." Vexel followed Thren to the core access point. 3 human engineers were still working inside, but they stepped aside when Vexel approached. One of them, a young male with hands stained by grease, pointed to a component Vexel didn't recognize. It was small, no larger than a clenched fist, attached to the core's primary data bus with a series of thin filaments. "What is that?" "An upgrade," the human said. "Your core processes tactical data through 17 verification steps before it reaches your command interface. We removed 12 of them. Your reaction time just improved by 60%. Vexel stared at the component. "You removed safety protocols without asking." "You asked us to make you survive." The human's voice was calm. "Speed is survival, verification is death. We chose speed." Behind Vexel, Thren's weapon came up. "Commander, these beings have violated every security protocol in the fleet. We should." 60%, Vexel interrupted. Thren hesitated. "What?" 60% faster reaction time. In a battle against assembly hunter-killers, what would that mean for our survival odds? The tactical calculations ran across Thren's face. Vexel could see the answer before Thren spoke. "It would mean," Thren's mandibles stopped twitching, "it would mean we might win." The human engineers exchanged glances, not triumphant, not relieved, just satisfied, as if they had known the numbers would convince Vexel before they ever installed the component. "We're not finished," the young male said. "The Remembrance is operational. The Silent Storm will be ready by morning, but your command ship needs another 12 hours. We found damage in your primary weapons array that your own engineers missed. Cracked power coupling. Would have failed during your first engagement." Vexel felt something shift in their chest. Not fear, not hope, something else entirely, something that felt like the beginning of trust. "Show me." The human nodded and led Vexel into the command ship's weapons bay. The damage was exactly where he said it would be, a hairline fracture in the coupling that connected the main battery to the reactor. Vexel had inspected this bay themselves before arriving at Earth. They had missed the crack completely. Every Eurylian engineer had missed it. A human with no military training had found it in 30 minutes. "How?" Vexel asked. "We listen." The human pointed to the coupling. "Your power systems have a sound. It's subtle, but it's there. When we first came aboard, this coupling was humming at the wrong frequency. We traced it back to the crack." "You diagnosed a military-grade power coupling by listening to it." The human shrugged. "Earth has a lot of old machinery. You learn to hear when something's about to break." Vexel looked around the weapons bay. Human engineers were everywhere, crawling through access tunnels, welding patches onto support struts, recalibrating targeting sensors with tools that looked handmade. They moved like they belonged here, like they had always been part of this ship. That was when Vexel noticed something wrong. "Where are my Marines?" The young human paused. "Your guards, they left about an hour ago, said they were going to get food." He glanced at his companion. They didn't seem worried anymore. Vexel's blood went cold for the second time since arriving at Earth. They're Marines, trained killers, veterans of a dozen battles against assembly forces, had left their posts because they no longer considered the humans a threat. The humans had done that. Not with weapon, not with force, just by being useful, by fixing things, by saving lives. By making the Eurylian fleet feel safe, for the first time in months. They're not just rebuilding our ships, Vexel realized. They're rebuilding our trust, our complacency, our defenses. A proximity alert chimed from Vexel's wrist display. Incoming vessels, assembly signatures, estimated arrival 40 hours. The humans had promised 4 days for the remembrance. They had delivered in 2. The assembly hunter-killers were arriving in less than 2. Vexel looked at the human engineers. They were still working, still moving, still calm. They already knew the assembly was coming. They had known before Vexel did. The remembrance emerged from the docks at 600 hours on the 3rd day. Vexel watched from the command ship's observation deck as the cruiser slid out of the repair ring, thrusters firing in sequences that looked wrong. The ship moved differently now, smoother, faster, with a predatory grace that hadn't been there before. The humans had changed the mass distribution when they reinforced the hull, changed the engine response when they rewired the control systems, changed everything. But the visual transformation was nothing compared to what Vexel saw when they accessed the Remembrance's tactical display. The guns were live. Not targeting solutions, not firing simulations. Live weapons, charged and ready, with a range that exceeded assembly specifications by 300%. The human targeting computer had integrated itself so completely into the ship's combat systems that Vexel couldn't tell where Eurylian technology ended and human modifications began. "This is wrong." Thren stood beside Vexel, staring at the same display. "They've turned our cruiser into something we don't understand, something we can't control." "Can the Remembrance's captain control it?" "The captain says the weapons respond faster than thought. She thinks of a target and the guns are already tracking it. No delay, no interface lag, just action." Vexel turned from the display. "That sounds like control." "That sounds like addiction." Thren's voice dropped. "Commander, the humans have wired our ships to respond to neural impulses. Our crews aren't piloting anymore. They're becoming the ships. Do you understand what that means?" Vexel understood perfectly. The Assembly's military doctrine was built on separation: pilots in cockpits, weapons officers at consoles, commanders on bridges. Layers of control designed to prevent any single point of failure from compromising an entire vessel. The humans had torn out those layers and replaced them with a direct neural link that bypassed every safety protocol in existence. If a Eurylian pilot lost control of their emotions during combat, the ship would feel it. The weapons would respond to fear, to anger, to desperation. The humans had turned warships into extensions of their crew's psychology. It was either the most brilliant military innovation Vexel had ever seen, or the most catastrophic. "Commander," the communications officer's voice cut through Vexel's thoughts. "Dock Master Ibanez is requesting your presence. She says the command ship modifications are complete." Vexel made their way to the primary airlock, Thren following with a hand never far from their sidearm. The dock's interior was quieter than before. Fewer workers, less shouting. Most of the humans had moved to the remaining ships, working through the night to finish before the assembly arrived. Rosa Ibanez waited at the airlock's inner door. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, fresh burns on her right forearm, clothes stained with fluids Vexel didn't want to identify. But she was smiling. "Command ship is ready," she said. "We found more damage than expected. Your reactor shielding was compromised in 3 places your engineers missed. Your primary computer core had a cascading failure cascade that would have taken out your entire navigation system within 6 months. We fixed everything. And in exchange, you learned everything. Rosa's smile didn't waver. Commander, we learned everything the first day. The rest was just finishing the work. Thren stepped forward. You've been inside our command core. You've seen our fleet deployments, our supply routes, your defenses, Rosa nodded. Yes, we've seen them, and we've seen how the assembly breaks through them every time. Do you want to know why you keep losing? The question hung in the air. Vexel wanted to refuse, wanted to order their Marines to arrest this human and every other human on the dock. But the assembly hunter-killers were 36 hours away, and the remembrance was flying like nothing Vexel had ever seen. Why? Because you fight fair, Rosa's voice was soft. Your weapons have safety protocols. Your ships have emergency overrides. Your soldiers have rules of engagement. The assembly has none of those things. They win because they're willing to do what you're not. And the humans are willing. Rosa looked past Vexel toward the command ship's open airlock. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've done things to ourselves that would make the Assembly's extermination squads look restrained. We know how to break things. We know how to break people. We just needed someone to give us permission to aim it somewhere else. Vexel's translator struggled with the weight of the words. You're saying you want to fight the Assembly for us. I'm saying we want to show you how to fight them yourself. Rosa reached into her pocket and pulled out a data chip. This contains everything we learned from your ships, every weakness, every vulnerability, every way the Assembly will try to kill you in your next engagement. She held the chip out to Vexel. Take it, use it, survive. Vexel's hand closed around the chip. It felt warm, body heat from Rosa's pocket, or maybe just the warmth of something new. The remembrance, Vexel said, the changes you made to its weapon system, the neural interface, is it stable? Rosa's expression shifted. The exhaustion remained, but something else moved underneath it, something that looked like anticipation. Stable enough for a test. A test. Rosa turned and walked back into the dock. Vexel followed, Thren closed behind, through corridors lined with human engineering equipment and Eurylian marine guards who no longer looked hostile, just confused, just watching. The dock's main observation bay faced empty space. The remembrance floated in the distance, engines burning soft blue, weapons cold but ready. Behind it, the remaining Eurylian ships waited in their cradles, human crews still crawling through their hulls. Your people have been asking what we did to your ships, Rosa said, why we changed certain systems, why we removed certain protocols. She gestured to the viewport. We're going to show you. A small drone drifted into view, one of the human maintenance tugs, unarmed, barely larger than a shuttle. It positioned itself 10 kilometers from the remembrance and broadcast a targeting signal. Fire, Rosa said. The remembrance didn't hesitate. Its main battery discharged a single shot, not a standard energy bolt, but something Vexel had never seen before. The projectile didn't travel in a straight line. It bent, warped, crossed 10 kilometers of empty space in a trajectory that ignored physics. The drone ceased to exist. Not exploded, not vaporized, ceased. There was no debris, no energy signature, no indication that anything had been there at all. Just empty space where a solid object had been a moment before. The assembly uses shields that deflect energy weapons, Rosa said quietly. They don't deflect what they can't detect. That shot didn't exist until it hit. No travel time, no warning, just arrival. Vexel couldn't speak. Thren had gone pale beneath their exoskeleton. The remembrance's main battery cycled down, smoke rising from vents that had never been designed for that kind of discharge. That was 1% power, Rosa added. Vexel turned from the viewport. The human dockmaster was watching them with an expression that wasn't triumph or concern or hope. It was patience. The assembly hunter-killers will be here in 34 hours, Rosa said. Your fleet will be fully repaired in 12. The choice is yours. You can run, you can surrender, or you can let us finish what we started." She walked away, leaving Vexel staring at the empty space where the drone had been. 1% power. 34 hours. The galaxy was about to change. The assembly hunter-killers arrived 22 hours early. Vexel was in the command ship's new neural interface chamber when the alarm sounded. The room had been human engineering 4 hours ago. Now it was a Eurylian command center, redesigned around a single chair that connected directly to the ship's primary systems. No consoles, no displays, just the pilot and the vessel, merged into something that felt like a living creature. "Commander," Thren's voice crackled through the ship's intercom. "6 assembly frigates just dropped out of FTL. They're already launching attack formations. Estimated engagement in 11 minutes. 11 minutes. Vexel's fleet was still scattered across the repair docks, 12 ships operational, 7 still undergoing final modifications. The Remembrance was ready. The Silent Storm was ready. The command ship was ready. Everything else was exposed, vulnerable, caught between human repair crews and assembly weapons. Where are the humans? Below decks, most of them stayed aboard when the alarm sounded. There. They're not leaving, Commander. They're securing their equipment. Vexel almost laughed. The assembly was about to destroy everything in orbit, and the human engineers were worried about their tools. It was either insanity or courage, and at this distance, Vexel couldn't tell the difference. "All operational ships," Vexel said, settling into the neural interface chair. "This is Fleet Commander Vexel. The assembly is here. They expect us to run. They expect us to surrender. They do not expect us to fight." Connections clicked into place behind Vexel's skull. The ship's sensors became their eyes. The weapons became their hands. The engines became their legs. Let's disappoint them. The command ship surged forward, breaking orbit with acceleration that would have killed a pilot in a standard interface. Vexel felt the G-forces as pressure, not pain. The human modifications had reinforced the inertial dampeners beyond anything the assembly had ever designed. The Remembrance fell into formation on their port side. The Silent Storm to starboard. Their neural interfaces synced through a network the humans had installed without asking permission. The assembly frigates were beautiful, sleek, deadly, designed by a civilization that had perfected the art of killing from a distance. Their weapons charged as they approached, targeting solutions calculated by minds that had never lost a fleet engagement. They had never faced human technology. "Target the lead frigate," Vexel ordered. 1% power. The Remembrance fired. The assembly frigate's shields flickered once, a reflexive response to a threat the sensors hadn't detected, and then the ship was gone. No explosion, no debris, just empty space where a warship had been a moment before. The remaining 5 frigates scattered, their formations dissolving into chaos. "What was that?" Thren's voice was barely audible over the alarm. "That was a message," Vexel replied. "Now we deliver the rest." The command ship's weapons came online. Vexel felt them like extra limbs, familiar and strange at the same time. Human engineering merged with Eurylian design. The targeting system didn't calculate trajectories. It simply asked Vexel where they wanted the shot to land, and the shot landed there. 3 frigates died in the first exchange. The surviving 2 turned to flee, their engines burning hard for the FTL jump point. Vexel's fleet pursued without orders. The neural interfaces had removed the delay between thought and action, between decision and execution. The Silent Storm caught the first frigate at the edge of the gravity well and tore through its hull with a single shot. The Remembrance disabled the second frigate's engines, then its weapons, then its communications. Vexel stared at the helpless assembly vessel through their ship's sensors. A living crew, trapped, afraid. Exactly the kind of target the humans had warned them about, the kind that made you hesitate. "Finish it," someone said. Vexel wasn't sure if the voice came from Thren or from the neural interface or from somewhere inside their own head. But they recognized the tone. It was the same tone the humans had used when they talked about fighting dirty, about doing what needed to be done. "Commander," Thren again, louder this time. "The frigate is broadcasting a surrender signal. They're asking for mercy." Vexel looked at their fleet, the Remembrance with its impossible weapon, the Silent Storm with its sensor-absorbing hull, the command ship with its neural interface and its human modifications, and its crew of beings who had just won their first battle in months. Mercy. The Assembly had shown none to the Eurylian colonies, none to the border worlds, none to the refugees who had died in the cold void between stars. But Vexel wasn't the Assembly. "Accept their surrender," Vexel said, "and inform Dock Master Ibanez that we have a new ship for her to examine." The channel opened. Rosa's face appeared on the display, not in the dock this time, but in what looked like a command center of her own. Screens surrounded her, showing the battle from every angle. Data streams Vexel couldn't read, scrolling past too fast to follow. "You didn't kill them all," Rosa said. "Not an accusation, just an observation." "They surrendered." "And you accepted," Rosa nodded slowly. "That's interesting. Most species in your position would have destroyed them, eliminated the threat, made sure no one came back." "The Assembly will send more. They always send more." "Yes," Rosa's gaze shifted to something off-screen. "But now you have a prisoner, someone who can tell you where the next fleet is coming from, what weapons they're carrying, how they plan to attack." Vexel understood. "You want me to interrogate them?" "We want you to let us interrogate them." Rosa's voice was flat. "You have rules about prisoners, about treatment, about rights. We don't." The command deck went silent. Vexel could feel their crew watching, waiting, wondering what their commander would do. The human engineers had already turned their warships into weapons of mass destruction. Now they wanted access to living prisoners. "Commander," Thren's voice was barely a whisper, "if we let them do this, we become complicit in something we can't take back." "We're already complicit." Vexel looked at the Assembly frigate drifting helpless in the void. "We brought them here. We let them inside our ships. We watched them turn our weapons into something that breaks the laws of physics." They turned back to Rosa. "What will you do to the prisoners?" Rosa considered the question longer than Vexel expected. "We'll ask them questions, they'll answer. When we're done, we'll return them to the Assembly, damaged but alive." She paused. "Their friends will see what happened to them. They'll know that surrender isn't safety. It's just a different kind of battlefield." Vexel closed their eyes. The neural interface was still connected. They could feel the command ship's heartbeat, the pulse of its reactor, the quiet hum of its modified weapons. Everything the humans had touched had become sharper, deadlier, more efficient. Including Vexel's conscience. "Do it." The Assembly frigate was towed into an empty dock. Human engineering teams boarded within minutes, carrying tools that looked nothing like repair equipment. The screams started an hour later. Vexel didn't ask what questions were asked. The Assembly sent another fleet 72 hours later, twice the size of the first. The Eurylian fleet, rebuilt, refitted, reborn, went out to meet them. Not one Assembly ship returned. The data arrived in fragments. Vexel sat in the command ship's observation deck, watching the repair docks work on the captured Assembly vessels. 3 more frigates had been added to the collection in the past week, their crews removed to human interrogation centers, their hulls opened to human engineering teams. The Eurylian fleet had grown from 19 ships to 31. The humans had stopped asking permission before boarding. They didn't need to anymore. The interrogation transcripts. Thren placed a data slate on the arm of Vexel's chair, all of them from every prisoner. Vexel didn't pick up the slate. "Summarize." Thren's mandibles twitched, the old tell of discomfort. "The Assembly knows about the humans. they've known for years. They classified Earth as a Level 3 threat after the first human exploration vessel entered their space 30 years ago. Level 3, that's agricultural, non-strategic. That's what they wanted us to believe. Thren's voice dropped. Commander, the Assembly has been watching Earth since before we made first contact. They've seen everything. The wars, the genocides, the weapons that could destroy planets. They didn't ignore humanity because humans were weak. Vexel felt the words settle into their chest like stones. They ignored humanity because humans were dangerous. More than dangerous. Thren finally met Vexel's eyes. The Assembly's strategic analysts concluded that engaging humanity directly would trigger a response that could destabilize the entire galactic political structure. So they did something else. They isolated Earth, refused trade agreements, blocked diplomatic recognition, made sure no one would give humans a reason to look outward. Until we arrived. Until we were desperate enough to accept any help from anyone without conditions. Thren's mandibles stopped moving. Commander, the humans didn't just repair our ships. They used us to access the Assembly's military network. Every battle we've fought since leaving their docks, they've been recording. Every weapon we've fired, they've analyzed. Every prisoner we've given them, they've turned into a source of intelligence. Vexel stood, walking to the viewport. The repair docks stretched out below, human crews crawling over Assembly hulls like ants on a carcass. Rosa Ibanez was down there somewhere, directing operations with the same calm efficiency she'd shown from the beginning. We were never customers, Vexel said slowly. We were delivery systems. The humans didn't have warships of their own. They couldn't build a fleet fast enough to challenge the Assembly, but they could find someone who already had a fleet, someone desperate enough to let them inside. Thren's voice was hollow. We brought them exactly what they needed, working Assembly technology, captured Assembly personnel, everything they required to understand how their enemy thinks, fights, and breaks. Vexel turned from the viewport. You're saying this was planned, from the beginning. I'm saying the humans have been playing a longer game than anyone realized. Thren held up the data slate. The prisoners are talking, not because we're torturing them. The humans aren't even asking about military strategy anymore. They're asking about politics, about supply chains, about which Assembly worlds would be most vulnerable to attack. Attack from where? We don't have the ships to reach Assembly core worlds. We don't. Thren's mandibles twitched again. But the humans have been building something in their orbital dock, something separate from our fleet, something they haven't shown us. Vexel was already moving toward the dock access corridor. Show me. The human engineers didn't try to stop them. They didn't even look up as Vexel and Thren walked through the repair bays, past the captured frigates, past the interrogation rooms where prisoners screamed behind sealed doors. The dock extended farther than Vexel had realized, deeper into the station structure, into sections that weren't on any of the schematics the humans had provided. At the end of the final corridor, a sealed door guarded by two human workers who looked less like engineers and more like soldiers. Fleet Commander, the taller human nodded. Dock Master Ibanez said you might come looking. Open the door. The humans exchanged glances. Then the taller one pressed a sequence into a wall panel, and the door slid open. Vexel stepped through and stopped breathing. The ship was enormous, larger than anything the Eurylian fleet had ever fielded, larger than any Assembly warship Vexel had seen. Its hull was dark and angular, covered in weapons emplacements that didn't match any known design. The engines alone were 3 times the size of the command ship's reactor, and everywhere, on the hull, on the docking clamps, on the maintenance platforms surrounding it, human workers moved with the same relentless efficiency they had shown on the Eurylian vessels. But these workers weren't repairing damage. They were building something new. What is this? Vexel's voice came out as a whisper. Rosa Ibanez stepped out from beneath the ship's forward section, wiping grease from her hands. She looked older than she had a week ago, thinner, more tired, but with a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "This is Earth's answer," she said, "and she's going to end the war." The assembly fleet arrived in force. 300 warships, battle groups from every sector, assembled over the past month while the Eurylian fleet repaired and rebuilt and grew. The assembly had finally noticed what was happening at Earth, the transmissions from captured vessels, the impossible weapons, the rising threat of a species they had dismissed for decades. They came to erase humanity from existence. Vexel stood on the command ship's bridge, watching the tactical display fill with enemy signatures. The Eurylian fleet had grown to 53 vessels, every ship the humans could repair, refit, or convince to join their cause. But 53 against 300 was suicide, even with human modifications, even with weapons that bent space and shields that learned from every impact. "We can't win this," Thren said quietly, "not in a straight fight." "Then we don't fight straight." Vexel turned to the communications officer. "Get me Dock Master Ibanez." Rosa's face appeared on the display. She wasn't in the dock anymore. She was on the bridge of Earth's Answer, the massive human warship that had been hidden beneath the station for weeks. Behind her, Vexel could see human crew members at human-designed consoles, wearing uniforms that looked more functional than ceremonial. "I see them," Rosa said before Vexel could speak. 300 ships, standard assembly formation. They'll try to overwhelm our defenses with sheer numbers. Can Earth's Answer handle that many? Rosa's smile was thin. Earth's Answer doesn't need to handle all of them, just the command ship. Cut off the head and the body dies. She paused. But we'll need your fleet to create an opening. Draw their fire. Keep them busy while we get into position. You're asking us to be bait. I'm asking you to trust us. Rosa's voice softened. We've given you everything we had. New weapons, new tactics, new ways to survive. Now we need you to give us something back. Vexel looked at their fleet. 53 ships crewed by beings who had been running for months. Beings who had lost homes, families, entire worlds to the Assembly's relentless advance. Beings who had come to Earth expecting charity and found something else entirely. Something that felt like hope. Eurylian fleet, Vexel said, broadcasting across all channels. We've been running since the war began, running from an enemy that wanted us dead, running from a future that offered nothing but darkness. They paused, feeling the neural interface pulse against their skull. Today, we stop running. The fleet moved as one. Assembly weapons fire filled the void as the Eurylian ships charged forward, their human-modified shields absorbing impacts that would have destroyed them weeks ago. The Remembrance fired its impossible weapon again and again, erasing assembly frigates from existence. The silent storm danced through enemy formations, its sensor-absorbing hull making it invisible to targeting systems. The command ship coordinated everything, a symphony of destruction conducted by a being who had learned to think faster than any assembly computer. But the assembly kept coming. 300 ships reduced to 200, 200 to 150. Still they pushed forward, their weapons finding gaps in the Eurylian defenses, their commanders willing to sacrifice anything to reach Earth. Then Earth's Answer moved. The human warship accelerated out of the dock's shadow, its engines burning with light that drowned out the nearby star. Assembly gunners turned to track it, but their targeting systems couldn't lock on. The human ship was moving too fast, changing direction too quickly, sliding through space like something that didn't obey normal physics. Vexel watched as Earth's Answer punched through the assembly formation, its weapons firing in every direction at once. Human technology met assembly engineering, and for the first time in galactic history, the assembly learned what it felt like to be outmatched. The command ship died in the first exchange. Rosa Ibanez had been right. Without coordination, the assembly fleet dissolved into chaos. Ships turned to flee. Others kept fighting, their crews refusing to accept defeat. The Eurylian fleet hunted them through the debris field, the Remembrance and the Silent Storm, and a dozen other human-modified vessels cutting down enemy after enemy until the void ran black with wreckage. When it was over, 112 assembly ships had been destroyed. 43 had surrendered. The rest had scattered into FTL, carrying news of Earth's victory to every corner of the galaxy. Vexel stood on the observation deck, watching the repair docks fill with captured vessels. The humans were already boarding them, already learning, already preparing for the next battle. Because there would be a next battle. The assembly wouldn't forgive this defeat. They would return with more ships, more weapons, more determination to destroy the species that had humiliated them. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, Vexel watched Rosa Ibanez walk onto the observation deck, still wearing her stained work clothes, still carrying the weight of everything she had done. "You knew," Vexel said, "from the beginning, you knew you were building something that would change the galaxy." Rosa leaned against the viewport, looking out at the captured assembly ships. "We knew we were tired of being ignored, tired of being dismissed, tired of watching the galaxy burn while everyone told us we were too small to make a difference." She turned to face Vexel. "So we found someone who needed us, someone desperate enough to let us prove what we could do. The Eurylian fleet was never your customer." "No," Rosa's smile was sad. "You were our excuse, our opportunity, our proof that humanity could stand with the rest of the galaxy instead of being hidden away like a shameful secret." Vexel considered this, considered everything that had happened since the Eurylian fleet first limped into Earth's orbit, the repairs that were more than repairs, the modifications that were more than modifications, the war that was more than a war. "Where do we go from here?" Vexel asked. Rosa looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the assembly was regrouping. Somewhere out there, other species were hearing about Earth's victory for the first time. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was learning a lesson it had refused to learn for centuries. "Forward," Rosa said, "together, whether the assembly likes it or not." Vexel nodded. The neural interface was quiet now. The battle was over, the ship at rest. But Vexel could still feel something humming beneath their skin, something that felt like the humans' relentless energy, their stubborn refusal to accept limits, their terrifying ability to turn desperation into victory. "Forward," Vexel agreed. The Eurylian fleet and the human engineers and the ship called Earth's Answer waited in the darkness, ready for whatever came next. The assembly had started a war they couldn't win. Earth had just proved it.